I'm Brent Homan, for those that don't know me, co-founder and chairman of Founders Forum, Founders Factory, First Minute Capital, and a few other things, Founders Academy for today's purposes as well. And for those that don't know Founders Forum, we are a global community of the top tech founders, corporate CEOs, and world-class investors. We are running this series of Founders Forum Live, FF Live events, where we've had a star-studded group of people talking to our community and a huge range of topics covered. But what is more important than education, which we are covering today? Without further ado, I'm going to hand you over to our wonderful moderator today, Asha Haji, who is the co-founder and COO of Founders Academy. So we thought Founders Academy and Asha would be a brilliant person to do this because she is at the forefront of changing education, online education. Founders Academy is a new type of business school for a changing world. Their 9-month alternative MBA provides a launchpad for ambitious professionals to reinvent their careers in London's most dynamic scale-ups, and is looking at doing more and more virtually, of course, and online. Asha has spent her career developing transformative products and experiences at the intersection of people, technology, and education prior to launching Founders Academy. And after she did her Harvard MBA, she was Chief Product Officer at School Apply, a platform to connect international students with study-based opportunities around the world. She also spent nearly 7 years working across a variety of leadership positions in tech, marketing, talent acquisition, and sales at EF Education First, a world leader in international education. It says the world leader, but I think others are on the call can dispute that. So Asha, over to you.
I'm delighted to be moderating today's Founders Forum live session on the future of online education. We have 2 exciting guests joining me today. The first is Dan Rosenzweig. He is the chairman and CEO of Chegg. It's America's leading student-first connected learning platform. Students from over 7,000 campuses nationwide use Chegg for college admissions, homework help, tutoring, textbooks, student deals, scholarships, and more. Prior to joining Chegg in 2010, Dan was CEO of Guitar Hero, and he was also Chief Operating Officer at Yahoo. We also have Simon Henderson. He is the headmaster of Eton College, one of the most prestigious boarding schools in the world. Former students of Eton represent a who's who in politics, royalty, business, entertainment, science, and the arts. During Simon's tenure at Eton as the headmaster, he's helped launch Eton X, which is an online learning platform with a focus on practical and entrepreneurial skills development, and it's open to high school students from over 50 countries. Dan, Simon, I'm really excited to have you both here today. There's so much going on in education. There's so much that needs to be discussed, considering there has been such a huge amount of conversation around disruption, and there has actually been a real disruption with this pandemic. So I'd love to just dive in and start this really timely, lively conversation. Dan, I'm hoping we can start with you. You've got a really interesting purview into what's happening on the ground at American universities, working with so many campuses and millions of students on your platform. Can you just tell us who you think is adapting well to COVID, if at all, and who is struggling and why?
Yeah, it's a great lead-off question, and thank you for inviting me. One of the things I would just add to the description of Chegg now is because of, and really since the pandemic hit around March 15th, Chegg has become much more global than it has ever been before. So we are growing in incredible amounts in countries you never imagined we would ever grow in. And we're becoming quite significant, including in the UK, obviously Canada, Australia, UK, but South Korea, Saudi Arabia, Turkey, all over the world. So we have a good lens of everything now, which we didn't really before. So the challenge, look, what we believe has happened as a result of the pandemic is it's accelerated trends that were inevitable anyway, that were beginning to take place, but the institutions, whatever industry you were in, were pushing back, trying to preserve their economic stream, their way of life, which really has been at odds with the demand of their consumers. So if you ask students in the United States, as an example, 80% of all students in the United States say they go to college for one reason, which is to get a better career. The second thing that most people don't know is the demographic makeup of the US student at this point is 25 years old, not 18 to 22. 70% of them go to state schools. 10% of all US college students go to one community college system, which is the California Community College System. They have 115 114 community colleges that do 2.25 million students just in those schools. That four-year college is a myth, that if people graduate at all, it's 6 years and 43% of people never graduate. So no one's been really doing it right, regardless of the pandemic. But since the pandemic, some things have really begun to take shape, which is schools that are contemplating hybrid environments where you can do in-person or online. Schools that are recognizing that scheduling people for a specific time of day is unfair because 40% of people are working 30 hours a week or more while they're going to school. And so we're seeing a movement towards schools that are thinking about more online, more adaptability, expanding and changing the curriculum, just as you heard from Eton. But nobody is there yet. I would say the ones that were prepared the best were the ones that were online first. So whether it was Southern New Hampshire University, which, by the way, many of you have never heard of, it's just the largest not-for-profit college in the United States now, with over 130,000 students, Arizona State University. So I have a lot of background on what they're trying to do in terms of mix match, online, offline. The challenge in America, and I'll take a break here, is that whether you're called for-profit or not-for-profit, all schools are for-profit. And as a result of that, they are rushing back to get people onto campus, in my opinion, prematurely, because they need the revenue. They need the admissions, they need the food and board, they need all the money that gets spent in the community and the town. And so these schools, I predicted 25% of all schools are going to go bankrupt in the next year. State schools used to be immune for it, but in the United States now, the states are broke because they've been paying for COVID, and they've cut back on all their investments in the state schools. So nobody's doing it right, but we haven't even seen the worst of it yet.
And so, Dan, just to summarize, do you think that the schools that are doing it, or at least further down on the path of doing it well, the big differentiator there is that they already had some online learning platforms in place prior to COVID? Is there anything else that you think differentiates them?
Well, look, here's what I think the education system we've been talking about it for over 10 years now. It needs to be more online, more on demand, less expensive. It needs to accelerate the path from learning to earning, and it needs to be in better recognition of who its customer is, with somebody who is older, who probably has a family. The average age of an online learner is 30-year-old. It's a woman who has a job and a child. So people can't be scheduled to go to a class at 9:20 or 10:40. Even in community colleges, if one class takes you a half a day, you got to commute there, take the class and commute back. So the online schools, they have the technology, they know how to teach this way, they've already been available. And so you're seeing a surge in summer schools, all online. You're seeing a surge in community colleges that shifted to online. What you're going to see is a real economic struggle for American schools who bet their financials on students, foreign students. 10% of all college students in the United States come from outside the US, and that's 15% of the revenue. They're full payers. So that's going to create an unbelievable amount of economic pressure. So we don't know who's going to do it even close to right, because no one's had to do it yet, with the exception of moving to online March 15th.
Interesting. All right. Simon, I'd love to hear your perspective. How have you at Eton been responding to the pandemic, and what are your plans for this autumn?
Thank you. Well, thank you for inviting me. Well, I would echo some of what Dan's just said. We were quite fortunate, I think, at Eton in that we already had a pretty developed online strategy that had been certainly over the past 18 months, 2 years, we'd increased quite significantly the way in which we were using online within our own school in everyday classes. And I think one of the things that the pandemic and the lockdown has really taught us and shown us is some of the things that online education can do, but also some of the things that it can't do. So I'm talking specifically about schools. So I guess we're talking about teenagers in particular, as opposed to adults, as Dan was just referring to. I think the challenges are perhaps slightly different. But it seems to us that actually what the online education can't really replicate in the same way is the human experience of a school and the social context of a school. we found that our pupils can continue to learn maths or history or English or whatever very effectively online. And in some ways, which I'll maybe come back to, arguably more effectively than they do in the classroom. But what they really miss is the human experience and the social connectivity of being within a school. And so I guess the focus for us has been on a kind of hybrid model of trying to use online to enhance and complement what the teacher does, but not to replace it. And I guess, while we've been locked down and the school's been physically closed, it's had to replace what the teacher's been doing. But looking forward, we think that there are the hybrid model is quite a good one. So if I give you a few specific examples, we about 18 months ago, we rolled out an iPad one-to-one device scheme where all of our pupils and all of our teachers had iPads. Some of our teachers were quite skeptical about that and were probably slow adopters. But I think a lot of them have really come round to the idea that technology can enhance and complement what they do. And the ability to share work between students, to give more effective feedback, to improve the efficiency of the classroom experience, to share dynamic resources, to get pupils working collaboratively. A lot of those things have been enhanced by technology. And so that's something that we are very keen to continue when the physical school reopens. We've also found that it's a great tool for us to extend our reach and to work with our partner organisations. And sadly, in the UK, as in many countries around the world, there's an inequality gap, and that is growing. COVID is extenuating the inequality that already exists within society, and certainly is true within education. And so we want to try and use technology to play our part where we can, to try and work with partner organisations and offer students in other settings opportunities that perhaps they wouldn't otherwise get. And that's something in particular we've used the EtonX platform for, which I'm happy to elaborate on if you'd like me to.
Yeah, I think this is perfect time to talk a little bit more about EtonX, because I think, as you mentioned, you feel that Eton has been in a privileged position, having an online platform that's already been launched for almost 5 years now, that you can lean on further during this pandemic. So can you just help everybody understand what EtonX is and how EtonX in particular has helped you come up with some best practices for online learning that other educators should be reflecting on during this time?
Sure. So EtonX is essentially an online platform. There's two aspects to it. There's the technological platform itself, and it has a very, we think, a very good online classroom that is specifically designed for education. So it's specifically designed with all kinds of safeguarding things inbuilt. It's also designed to enable very effective sharing of digital content between the teacher and the student. And it's designed to enable breakout groups and things like that. So to effectively replicate the classroom experience as much as it can. So there's that technology platform itself, but then there's also the EtonX courses, which we deliver through that technology. And those are what we call future skills courses. So it's things like creative problem solving, research skills, public speaking, critical thinking, interview skills, things like that. And I suppose the idea is that it is there to enhance and complement what young people are already learning in school. So we very specifically haven't gone down the route of teaching GCSE maths or A-level English or whatever it is. We could have gone down that route, but most students in the UK and around the world are learning those subjects within their schools. And we think that actually, in terms of their future employability and in terms of the types of skills that they really need for later on in life, actually it's those personal skills and those personal qualities that are more important in many ways. You need to get the qualifications in terms of academic grades to open doors to the future. But how happy and successful you are when you go through those doors depends on a much broader range of things. And certainly the Eton experience itself, we take the view that our pupils learn as much, if not more, out of the classroom as they learn within it. and as much, if not more, from each other as they learn from their teachers. So we're trying to replicate that. When we went into lockdown in the UK, EtonX has been around, as you say, for 4 or 5 years, and it's had a pretty successful market, particularly overseas. But we made the courses available free of charge to all state schools in the UK when UK schools shut down in mid-March. We weren't sure what type of uptake we would get, but we were very pleased that we had a very significant interest, and we've now got over 200,000 state school children in the UK who are registered on EtonX courses. And so we recently announced a major initiative to invest in providing a whole range of different programs to increase educational opportunity to pupils around the country, and to play our bit where we can. And EtonX is a strong part of that. So we are committed to continuing to offer it, or aspects of it, for free to the state section in the UK, and we're looking to develop the courses further. But the idea is that it won't be things that the students can already learn in their own school. It's supposed to be complementing and enhancing things that they're learning, and perhaps giving them opportunities that they wouldn't otherwise be getting.
Got it. And Simon, just as a follow-up, how are you thinking about preparing for autumn for current Eton students coming back, and naturally them having to potentially be in a virtual or potentially hybrid environment?
Yeah, so we are hopeful that we're a full boarding school, so all of our pupils board. We're hoping at this stage to welcome all of our students back in September. We are quite a long way down the road of developing our own testing capability, so that we can have our own kind of mini test and trace system within the school. But we're fully expecting that some of our students, perhaps particularly those overseas, are not going to be able to travel back, and that there will be times when students are going to have to isolate or be away from school. So we're going to be continuing with a hybrid model. And we've been looking at ways. So we've been running a virtual school while the school's been closed, and we're looking to continue that into the autumn. And actually, probably a lot of our academic teaching will continue online, and it's the aspects of the school experience that the pupils can't get effectively online, which, as I said earlier, is a lot of that kind of human experience and the social connectedness between pupils. That's what we'll be focusing on, particularly in the school itself. But we're expecting to have some kind of hybrid model, and we'll be using EtonX technology and other forms of technology to deliver that.
Great. All right. I'm going to switch gears. I want to talk a little bit about tuition fees and the cost of learning. A very provocative thought leader in this space, which we can discuss the merits of his thinking. Scott Galloway has been writing a lot of articles lately, getting a lot of press lately around this radical reimagining of education and this reckoning of higher education that is upon us all right now. For those who don't know, Scott Galloway is an NYU professor who has been blogging a lot lately during this pandemic and showing up in the news quite a bit. He refers to universities as having brazenly positioning themselves as luxury brands for decades, raking in gross margins on par with Louis Vuitton and Hermes. He also has a theory that tuition fees must come down in light of this pandemic, and there's an equation that says the value of tuition fees equals accreditation, the actual learning, and the campus experience. I guess a question for you both, and we'll start with Dan. Without the campus experience, do you think tuition fees need to come down?
Well, I welcome Scott to the discussion. He's about 10 years late, but he's got a large platform, so I appreciate the fact that he's now amplifying things that we've been saying for years. First of all, the price of tuition needs to come down regardless. It's absurd. So to pay $240,000 or $250,000 for a private institution over 4 years is a lot of money, but even state schools now have become a lot of money. We talked about earlier economic disparity. We talked about income disparity, and we talked, in the United States, a conversation that is long overdue, and even very late to come to it, as many others are, which is social injustice. And what's the point of education? So there's a privileged few that can take 4 years off from their life and get the experience that we all believe we would love to be able to provide to our children or have gotten for ourselves. But the overwhelming majority of students don't have that luxury, don't have that opportunity to spend 4 years outside of the workplace. And so the price of tuition has needed to come down for years. Now, there is a discussion, which I think is a healthy discussion, which has been led by people like Dr. Paula Blank at Southern New Hampshire University and others, which is what is the price that people are willing to pay for the ROI on the degree? And what is the price people are willing to pay for all the other value that has been discussed, which is very legitimate. It's just extraordinarily limited to the number of people who could actually benefit from that. And there's nothing wrong with it. It's just we should acknowledge that the overwhelming majority of citizens will never get that opportunity, right? Even if those schools were willing to open up for free, they're not big enough to do that with the number of people that are trying to get an education. So, so the cost of education increasingly, at least in the United States for years, has been a discussion of what's the ROI. And, you know, Chegg has done, we probably provide education support to more students than anybody in the world at this point. So in the United States alone, I think we're going to have over 8 million paying customers, or nearly that this year. We'll have over 30 million users who use our free writing product and math products and other things. So we have a really good insight into what students think and what students want. We just did a piece of research now about how students have judged their institutions, 4 years institutions, state schools, 2-year schools, and the rest of it. They recognize increasingly that they cannot borrow money and go to college. The United States has 44 million people with $1.6 trillion in debt that cannot be declared as bankruptcy ever in your life. And 40% of people are behind on the payments, and 8 million people over the age of 40 still have college debt. 43% of the people that go to school don't ever get a degree. So the system has been broken for a long time. Prices have gone up. Number of people that have been getting degrees have gone down. The relevancy of the content and the curriculum has begun to obviously decrease as the world has become more technological in its background. And you're seeing now Apple, Google, Facebook, our own company, every significant company in Silicon Valley is dropping the need for most jobs to have a degree at all because there aren't enough people with the degrees to employ. Now, of course, with unemployment going up, that may change back for a while. But the reality is people are getting more into the jobs that have more permanence, which are not coding jobs, but they're jobs that require you to understand technology. The number one and the number two job skill requested by every American employer, and we did over 2 million job searches for this of listed jobs, are communication skills and Microsoft Office. So if you're a brilliant analyst, but you can't use Excel, nobody in finance is hiring you. If you're a salesperson and you can't use Salesforce, if you're a creative genius, but you can't use Adobe, if you're an HR and you can't use Workday or ServiceNow, this is where the world has gone professionally. It doesn't mean there isn't value in all the other things we're talking about. There clearly is, but it cannot be. So I think what you're seeing in the United States is right now there's a bidding war. There, for the first time that I can recall, prices are dropping and schools are giving out more and more scholarships to try to get the best students to pay them anything at all. And so you're going to see a lot of traditional 4-year private schools go out of business because people are really, they're saying no. They're just saying we're not going to do it anymore in big enough numbers to matter. So yes, there needs to be a reckoning of what the cost of a degree should be and based on ROI. And then there is a relevance to what the cost of if you can afford that in-person experience, because it does provide all the benefits that were being discussed. It's just too small in terms of the number of people that are trying to go through the education system. So if you look at Harvard, Stanford, you look at all the Ivy League schools, it's less than 100,000 people. Southern New Hampshire is 130,000 people. University of Central Florida is 100,000 people. ASU, 72,000 people. So there is that path, but we need to create new paths from learning to earning and accelerate that path and make it cheaper and make the context and content more relevant to getting a sustainable job.
All right, Simon, what are your thoughts? Should tuition come down?
Well, two parts to it. I mean, first of all, I think it should definitely come down if in a COVID context, if you're not offering the full service. So we, we discounted our fees by a third during our summer term because pupils weren't physically on campus and we didn't feel that it was justifiable to charge a full fee. I mean, I would agree up to a point with what Dan's just said, but so we're a school that charges high fees, and that's because we believe in offering the most outstanding education we can, and in order to do that effectively and sustainably over time, it costs a lot of money to run. As I say, we're a full boarding school, etc. However, our basic philosophy is that we want to make our school the best it can possibly be. And we can always be improving that. And then we want to share that as broadly as we possibly can. And I absolutely agree that it's not acceptable and it's not right that elite and inverted commas institutions should only be educating people that can afford a very high price tag. That's not right. Having said that, I don't think that by a school like Eton or a university like Harvard, by them lowering their standards, that is automatically in itself going to improve the life chances of people more broadly. So the way we approach it, as I say, is by to me, education is a positive sum game. The more education you put into the system, the better it is for all people. And I don't think that there are some who say it's a negative sum game in that the consequence of educating one person really well is that you automatically educate somebody else less well. And certainly in the UK, I think partnership between schools and between educational institutions is absolutely the way forward, where schools can harness the excellence that they have, and different schools have different things that they're good at, and they can try and share that with students from other schools, with teachers from other schools, with people in other educational settings, and can offer wider range of opportunities to young people collectively. And I think if we're talking about online education, I think that online has the ability to democratize education in a way that physical campuses are never going to be able to keep pace with. I think they're much more, online is much more scalable, it's cheaper, it's more flexible, and I think you can, if you can harness the excellence that exists within schools and universities and find a really effective, flexible, cost-effective way of sharing that as broadly as you can, that I think is a model that we should be working towards. And I say that coming from a school that charges high fees, but as I say, I'm not sure that the consequences of us lowering our fees would be that almost certainly we would lower the quality, and that's not, over time we would lower the quality, and that's not something we want to do.
All right. I want to switch gears. Speaking of delivering online learning experiences, there's been a lot of talk, obviously, about that and what it means to engage in a classroom experience online. And naturally, as part of the cadence of a school experience, you have to engage in exams. And there's obviously now some challenges that are posed when students have Google at their fingertips. Everything, all the world's information is something that they have access to. So that really runs counter to traditional exams, which require memorization and assessments in a way that frankly predates the internet. So Dan, I wanted to ask you, how should we reimagine exams and assessments for online learning? Or should we just get rid of exams entirely and think of this completely differently?
So Chegg doesn't focus on curriculum, except in the category of the company we acquired, Thinkful, which is in skills-based space. So I'm not sure we're the right person to tell you what kind of curriculum there should be and how to do it. But I think your point is a really important one, which is, look, students in many US colleges, the schools are so big that people come in the class, then they leave, the exam gets transferred anyway. If professors have not updated their exams in years, and unfortunately that's the case in many situations, those things have existed in many places all over the place. And then of course there's Google, and then there's other online learning platforms that students have learned to use, including our own. And in that world, we do need to reimagine. There are issues over, if a school was unprepared and they just gave a standard exam that they've always given, whether or not there was an internet or not, students were going to text each other, call each other, and regardless. So if you're going to be teaching remote, there are examples of where it works really well. And these are the schools that have historically done online education at scale. And a lot of it has to do with not just testing, but checking for the actual ability depending on what the class is. You know, we as a company recognize that this was a challenge over COVID. There's a lot that we're trying to do in the space, but you know, as long as there's a Google, there's always going to be places to find information, and that's going to be a challenge. Proxying is a very interesting thing, but very difficult because people don't want online proxying and spies in their home if they're going to be in their home. So that's another area that's this great deal of difficulty. So I do think students are going to have to be tested on their abilities, not just on memorization. And I think if they don't do that, we're going to continue to run into this problem, because as people get more remote, or as the information proliferates, you're not really going to see much of a change in behavior of a small subset of students. So I do think it needs to evolve. You know, Chegg is going to be doing some things. We automatically take things down. We block the number of questions that you can ask. And in addition to that, we're working on something called ghosting, which is trying to build a piece of technology for professors that during their midterms of their exams, we can block access to any of the questions that are on those exams. But even if we do that, and we will, you're still going to run into Google or texting your friend or calling your friend. So we all need to become more technologically savvy, and we all need to figure out more ways for students to show their abilities rather than just be tested.
Simon, any follow-up thoughts on that?
Yeah, I definitely think that the testing regime and the exam framework in the UK needs to evolve, and I hope that COVID will accelerate that and be a catalyst for change. So to me, exams test, I mean, they test a particular type of skill, and there's a skill to doing well in particular exams. They're not the type of skills you really need later on in life. I'm all for assessment, and I think assessing people's progress and assessing whether people understand things and assessing whether people are able to do things is really important. But there are lots and lots of different effective ways you can do that don't involve you sitting in silence, you know, working on your own, recounting from memory a whole load of things you've pre-learned, which is what traditional exams do. And those aren't skills. You know, when I applied for my current job as head at Eton, yeah, I went through lots and lots of different assessments. At no point was I asked to sit in silence on my own with no use of notes, and couldn't speak to anybody else, and you know, couldn't collaborate. And that's not what I do on a day-to-day basis. I try and have problems to address every day, but you're always collaborating, talking to other people, etc., etc. So I think exams test a very particular type of skill, and I'm not necessarily doing down the students who learn that skill. It's you know, there's something in that, but it's not the things that they're going to need later on. And in the UK this year, they cancelled public exams, and we've moved towards teacher assessed grades. I think broadly speaking, they will work. I think particularly moving forward, we could do teacher assessed grades a lot better, because one of the particular challenges this year is that nobody knew that that was the process you were working towards. It was suddenly something that was sort of you know, dumped on everyone very late in the process. So I think therefore the outcomes for some students who didn't know that that's what they were working towards, you know, may not be entirely fair. But broadly speaking, I think the idea of us updating and refreshing the way we assess people, the way that, you know, what it is we really value in education, and what are the ways of assessing that, I think we need to reconsider that. And as I say, I hope that this crisis, which has forced people to change the way they do things, both in terms of the way that students learn, but also in the way that people are assessed, I hope that that's a catalyst for sustained change into the future.
I totally agree with that. I think it's well stated. And I think that part of what COVID has revealed is where the cracks are to move to the future. So you can't really hold a lot of people responsible for not having been ready for a pandemic. We hadn't experienced one since 1917, 1918. So I think there's lots of ways to get press to blame, but I think we should move away from the blame and say, all right, now that we know what we know, what has to change? What's the technology? What's the price point? How long should it be? How long should it take to actually get a degree? What should be included in a degree? And then there's the reality of the budgets, which is, if you look in the United States, it's just an example. Every state school is cutting it. So payrolls are being cut in administrations. All support systems for students are being cut. And if we've all known it, we just haven't wanted to talk about it, which is a lot of the social unrest, which is really well necessary in the United States and probably the world, is the fact that if you look at California as an example, the ratio of guidance counselor to student, whereas at Eton, it's probably close to 1-to-1, whereas in California, it's 1 to 1,000, which means that those kids have not had any guidance, any help. They don't have access to tutoring. They don't have access to support. They have, they may have 1 or 2 parents that are both working. It's a really challenging situation. And so a lot of what education also needs to evolve to is figuring out where you are and how to get you to a higher place than you came in at, as opposed to the way it was designed, which is assuming everybody comes in at the same level, and then it's a race to see who performs the best. And that also has to evolve. We have to say, if you come in here, we got to get you to here. And technology can allow for assessments in that way that aren't designed to grade the person as to succeed or fail, but rather to acknowledge where they need more help and where we can spend less time with them.
Amazing.
But can I just add to that? I think in terms of teaching, that's what the best teachers always do. At Eton, there's a few years ago, they were refurbishing a room in the historic part of the school. So we were founded in 1440, and they were refurbishing a medieval room, and they uncovered this wall painting from the late 15th century, and it had a teacher sitting on a chair with pupils around him on the ground, and there was an inscription in Latin from a Roman who lived in the 1st century AD, and the inscription translates as the excellence of the teacher is to identify differences of talent, and that is so the excellence of the teacher is to identify differences of talent, and that's the kind of that was the whole ethos behind the liberal education. The idea that the teacher is there to draw out people's talents, and over time, I think we've lost that, and it's been less about drawing out talents and more about assessing whether you've hit particular objectives or not, and that's sort of the wrong way around. And I think we need to get back to the idea that the teacher is there to draw out the talents of the students. And again, I think the online world allows you to personalize learning in a way that frees the teacher up and is less of a giver of information and is much more of a facilitator of understanding, which to me is what it's ultimately what the role of the teacher should be.
Which would be beautiful if we can get there.
Absolutely. So we're going to open up a poll for everybody who's here in the Zoom room with us. The question for the poll is, which you should see, what do you think education will look like post the pandemic? Online learning is here to stay, or higher education will return to normal within a year's time? So go ahead and get your answers in, and we'll end the poll shortly. Let's move on to some audience questions now. We've got a question from Matt Greenfield. You are, Matt, the managing partner at Rethink Education. So I'd love to have you unmuted, Matt, and we'd love to hear your question.
I'm also a board member at Southern New Hampshire University, university which Dan mentioned. Dan, so my question for you is about the sort of utopian potential for Chegg, not just to help students get through colleges as they are today, but to actually transform colleges and help them to do a better job of the thing you alluded to at the beginning, to help students get good first jobs. Right now, the feedback loops between colleges and employers are not very good. what are you going to do other than buying Thinkful? What are you going to do for the career placement office? What are you going to do to improve college's ability to teach work-ready skills?
Yeah, look, it's a fantastic question and a really big challenge, but as a business, it's a marvelous opportunity. As a board member of Southern New Hampshire, you may know that we just announced our first partnership moving in that direction with Southern New Hampshire, which is if you take now a Thinkful class, you can count that skill towards towards certain credits, towards certain degrees, which we've never had before. But the first thing we're doing is doubling the curriculum. The second thing we're doing is we've lowered the price by 30%. We've already brought down the price. The next thing we're doing, which we've started in 2 of our classes, is we have IP on chat-based tutoring, which means that a lot of the problems for online learners is the availability of the immediacy of help if they get stuck. And so what Chegg has built over time is to unstuck you in many categories, but this technology allows us in the skills category now to say, if you're somebody taking that class and it's 2 o'clock in the morning because it's a self-paced class and you don't know what to do, that generally leads to dropping out because you don't have access to a professor for another week. It's very expensive. It has to be for a scheduled time. 72% of all people that are taking Thinkful classes now that have access to immediate live chat-based tutoring already use it. And so what we're trying to do is increase the curriculum, lower the price, build in academic support for those people immediately, building assessments along the way. We're taking the risk out of trying it, which is we're giving 2 weeks free. And if you want to leave after 2 weeks, you can with no problem. We've increased the number of ISAs. 59% of our students now are using ISAs, which is income sharing agreements, which means that we've not only lowered the price, but if you don't finish it, you don't pay. If you finish it, you don't get a job in that category, you don't pay. And so that brings us to specifically your question, which we have a series of data scientists working on all the companies that are requiring these kinds of skills. And then we're connecting them to Thinkful so that they can meet the students along the way and actually know who these people are and actually have a job pre-ready for them if we can before they even get their degree. It's good for our economics. It's marvelous for the student. It's great for the companies. And because we're doing it all online, we should be able to scale. So, we hope to be able to do 25,000 students in a year next year and then get to 100,000 students. When we had it, it was a couple of hundred students a year. So everything we try to do is at scale, but a lot of it is not only to lower the price, de-risk it, improve the curriculum to be directly to lead to a specific job in large scale openings in companies, and to unstick you when you're stuck at the exact moment you are, so you're more likely to complete it, give you live human help support inside that curriculum, and then have jobs pre-ready for you. And we would love to do that with more institutions. We're in discussions with 3 of them now, Southern New Hampshire being one of them, but we're in discussions with one of the historically Black colleges, universities, and we're in discussions with one of the biggest hybrid online and offline, because every one of them now recognizes that academics, in addition to job skills, is what employers are looking for. One or the other isn't the complete student anymore. So we are using data science to match what the skills are that need. We're providing that information to schools, but most of them don't want to adjust their curriculum yet. So then what we're doing now with Thinkful is we're offering partnerships with Thinkful direct to schools where we do all the work, so that school actually can not only offer it, but profit from it, and not only profit from it, but the student can actually get credit for that school. So that's the direction we're going in. It's a start, but it by no means solves the problem at scale yet, but that's the direction we're trying to go in. But thank you for that question, because it really does highlight what we believe needs to happen.
Great. We've got another question here. This is from Ray J. Naik. He's the CEO of Skilled, formerly CEO and co-founder of KeyPath and FutureLearn.
Thanks very much. Dan, it's good to see you. Simon, you too. Very quick couple of questions. Firstly, Dan, you've tracked the business models in this space almost better than anyone else over the last decade. And I'm staggered by the kind of outreach the universities are kind of having with the private sector now, and the conversation is far more responsive, far more multi-dimensional than it used to be, that they're open to different sorts of conversations because they need to grow the business, to grow international student numbers, to diversify balance sheets. We've obviously seen, the unbundling of OPM to a certain extent. We've seen the move towards employer-led programs, the Guild and Instride model. What do you kind of anticipate seeing over the next few years, largely driven by COVID, and anything you think that should be provided by the private sector that isn't kind of in the mix right now, other than obviously what Chegg is doing and about to do? And then second quick question, Simon may have a view on this as well, but there's been a lot of talk about the move towards lifelong learning and how this kind of whole situation, the pandemic, might be a kind of very significant milestone shift. I often think there's a bit too much hyperbole at a time of great unrest. But what's your view on whether this is going to herald a significant kind of cultural shift in our societies, or to what extent will things remain the same?
Well, I'll start, but there's a lot in there to unpack, and it's great to see you. Thank you for the questions. So we have tracked the business models because when we started, or when I took over the company, we almost went out of business 3 times, and we've had to evolve ourselves. And very fortunately now, the business model is the one that we always wanted to work towards, and it's obviously starting to work, which is high growth, high margins. But the fascinating thing about our business model, which people are only starting to talk about now, is we've not taken our prices up in 10 years. So how is it we've been able to grow, increase our gross margins, increase our EBITDA, increase our percentage of EBITDA to free cash flow and not take our prices up? And it's because we offer overwhelming value, and we built it more like a software company. And software companies have always had historically very large margins. There's a lot that can and needs to be done. So the schools, many of the schools are going to survive, and many of the students are going to want to go there. But there needs to be technology that better connects the student who doesn't arrive at that school with the same level of skill that the professor is used to teaching at. There needs to be assessment. There needs to be multilingual. In the United States, by 2025, I think 25% of all students' English will in fact be their second language. There needs to be translation capabilities. There needs to be immediacy. One of the challenges with online education and online learning is the students get lonely, and they get bored, and they get scared, and they don't have any support, and they don't have that network and that community that they're used to on live campuses. There needs to be other ways to engage students and to allow them. There needs to be a focus on mental health because there's a lot of these issues are creating mental health issues that we didn't anticipate or didn't think schools would have to be responsible for. We're going to have to get into areas like caregiving, when you recognize that so many students actually have children of their own. And the curriculum needs to evolve. It needs to, look, 95% of the time on a college campus is spent outside the classroom. What else can you be offering those students to prepare them for their business life as well as their academic life and their life as good citizens? Same thing can be held true, to online, which is what else does a full citizen need to be educated in? Most students have never even seen money before. They don't even understand how to use money. They've never seen cash. They've never had a bank book or a balance sheet. So there's an unlimited number of categories that Chegg students have asked Chegg to provide. We're nowhere near peaking out. But there's the entire category. So if you go to the lifelong learning, there's the entire category of professional skills. So I break down lifelong learning into things that people, because the technology allows you to learn on your own, anything you want to learn and learn it online, there will be people that will constantly learn to evolve the full roundedness of their life. The areas that we're focused on, and the one that I think most people confuse with it, is there's going to be a need for upskilling your career for the rest of your life. From CEO to assistant, the technology changes. Now we're all going to have to figure out how to work in remote learning. How do you manage in remote learning? How do you deal with keeping people engaged? How do you deal with the promotion path? How do you deal with unconscious bias of people that come into the office and don't come into the office? There's so much to learn that COVID has revealed and accelerated that I just think the opportunities are sort of limitless now, but a little bit scary from time to time. I don't know if that answered it in full. There was a lot there, but I tried. Simon,
do you want to jump in?
Yeah, just on that last point, I mean, I would agree with Dan about the need for people to constantly be upgrading their skills. And I think, again, one of the things that COVID has shown us is a need for people to be able to think laterally, to be able to adapt, to be able to come up with new ideas, new solutions, but potentially move into new careers at short notice. So I would certainly agree with that part of Dan's answer. The other thing I would say is that I do think that there's going to be a process of profound change, societal change as a result of this, not necessarily so much around lifelong learning, but I think around access to opportunities and the demand for access to opportunities. And I think COVID has really shone a light on some of the inequality that exists within society, certainly in the UK, I'm sure in the US, and I'm sure in many countries around the world. And I don't think that's going to go away. And I think we're seeing that in all kinds of different ways, rightly in my view, of people who perhaps have felt disenfranchised for whatever reason, and that society is going to have to be making opportunity more equally available to people. And in education, I think all of us involved in education have to play a part in that. And institutions that just are inward looking and making short-term decisions based on their own short-term financial imperatives, I think will regret it seriously in the medium to long term. Mark Carney, the governor of the Bank of England, wrote an article in The Economist a few weeks back where he said, at the end of this pandemic, institutions are going to be judged by who shared and who hoarded. And I think there is going to be a societal change, and we need to be opening up opportunity. And again, in terms of education, I do think, as I said earlier, that online education has the potential to democratize opportunity and to widen access to opportunity within education in a pretty powerful way.
I think, to go to that quote, I think institutions and corporations are going to be judged on whether or not they finally realized who their customer was and who they need to serve and who they need to put first. And so I can't speak for Eton or colleges in the UK. I can't speak for many of them in the United States, which is the institutions are designed to support and survive for themselves. So they're not designed for the student, or they wouldn't charge a toll for every single thing that you do. They wouldn't be rushing to open back a campus where there's risk on health if there weren't an economic imperative. The bookstore wouldn't have to give 15% of its profits to the school. The ATM machines where you take cash out wouldn't take $3.50 for every $10 you take out. So I think we're all going to be judged on how do we put the consumer, the person that's consuming what we do, at the front of everything that we do. And we tried to do it from the beginning, but even we are, acknowledging that there's areas where we need to do better, which is why we lowered the price after we bought Thinkful. We lowered the price 30%. We started offering $3 million in scholarships because we recognized $4,000 is a lot more affordable than $8,000, particularly if we're going to take all the risk if you don't get the job. That's how you start to give democratization and fairness. But even there, if we didn't have real live teaching inside the system, many of the students would take it, want to pass, but would need help and wouldn't get it and would drop out. So it's going to take a collective reevaluation of what does it take to really serve the primary constituent in your business. And for us, it's the student.
Great. All right, we've got the results of the poll that we put out earlier. 83% actually think that online learning is here to stay, and 17% think higher education will return to normal within a year of the pandemic wrapping up. So let's move on to probably one of our final questions from the audience. So this one comes from Lucy Cranwell Ward. She's the co-founder of Upskill Me. Lucy?
Yeah, hi there. My question was for Simon, and it was just related to how are these critical life skills tracked at Eton? How are they measured? Is there a way that you ensure that students definitely develop those, all of the things that you're providing. How is that tracked and measured? Yeah, that was my question.
Okay. Well, I think the answer, so it's not tracked in a I suppose an explicitly quantitative way. So we don't grade people against certain pro-social skills that we think they should have, or etc. But it is pretty actively tracked more informally and implicitly by individual tutors. So all of our students have a personal tutor, and they meet them very regularly, and they would routinely be talking about engagement with school life, and they would be talking about and overtly promoting the kind of values that we think are important. We also try to, I suppose,
is that for the 200,000 students off your campus also, or just the ones on Eton's campus?
So those are the ones specifically on our campus. Those who are doing EtonX courses, there is an assessment attached to that, and essentially you go through a course and you do get a certificate at the end of it. But we also have our own research centre, and we do regular research projects where we survey the boys, and because we're an all-boys school, we survey the pupils, and we track that kind of data in terms of the kinds of things that they value. That's done at a more macro level than at a micro level. So a lot of it is done, I suppose, implicitly rather than explicitly. So we're quite explicit about what we value, but we're relatively implicit about the way that we actually track that on an individual level. But we will be trying to through all of the things that we celebrate and that we recognize as being important within the school. We tend to stress those kind of personal, wider qualities over and above raw attainment. Attainment has its place, but actually it's the everything else that we really value. But we don't grade people against it as such.
So
Okay,
we're actually working with an outside firm to do some of those types of non-academic or skill-based assessments, but sort of the human assessments, more cognitive assessments. And we tested 4,000 potential interns, 40,000 applied, 4,000 filled out this thing to come work at Chegg for the summer. And it was remarkable. And a lot of it came from what employers have told us they're looking for in terms of the more human skills that they want. And so we're working on ways to show whether or not those skills lead people to get to the front of the interview line and actually get the job converted faster than people who don't have those skills.
Yeah, sorry, I should have provided introductions. I'm the founder of a company called Upskill Me, and we provide schools with a digital record of achievement to track their skills, to track their certificates and achievements throughout school, and they can see how their skills are progressing and tracking over time, which is a platform which is free for all schools. Sorry, I didn't provide that background first, but essentially we help schools track soft skills and also digital skills, so that when they leave school, they have a picture of how their skills and achievements have developed, and they can share that with an employer easily with a click of a button. So should have provided the overview, but yeah, good to know.
So it's a little bit like Degree, but for schools.
Oh, sorry.
I said it's a little bit like Degreed, but for schools rather than corporations.
Yes. Sorry, I've not heard of that platform, but I have to have a look. So it's like a digital record of achievement is the easiest way, tracking key skills. So.
Yep. No, it's necessary, and Degreed has just raised hundreds of millions of dollars to try to do that in the corporate space, but they haven't done it in the education space.
Oh, okay. Thanks. Thank you for your answers.
Great. Thank you, Lucy. Brent, I think we have a final question from you as well.
He's on mute.
I think he might be on mute.
I did press on mute, but you often need to press twice. I'm pressed twice. So super quickly, if I were an EdTech entrepreneur, and there are many listening today, how could they work with each of you? So obviously, Eton, I think, has one of the world's best brands in education, and a famous brand internationally as well. So could entrepreneurs try and use that brand internationally? Are there ways to do that? And for Dan at Chegg, I know you work with lots of companies, you buy lots of edtech startups. Are there ways of companies who are earlier in their journey who want to try and work with Chegg? Is there a sort of onboarding platform? Or have you ever thought of doing a Chegg accelerator? Those sorts of things.
Do you want me to go first, or how do you want to do this?
Either way, Asha, you go, Dan, you're on.
No problem. Go for it, Dan.
So when we think about partnerships or we think about acquisitions, it really hasn't changed in terms of the basics. And I think anybody who runs a business would think similarly, which is what's Chegg's IP. So we have our reach, which is 20 to 30 million people a month. We have direct relationship with the customer, and we'll have nearly 8 million of those paid relationships by the end of this year. We're actually growing faster in my 10th year than we grew in my 9th and 8th and 7th, on top of a much higher base, which is honestly a shock to us. We're obviously grateful for it, but there's no need for what we do, it seems globally now. So we own the customer, we own the data, we own our brand, we own our own channel of distribution, so we're not dependent on any partners to run our business, and we own about 100% of our content, which is why, in a perfect world as a platform company, that's what you'd want to do. So what we're looking for are people who help solve big student problems that Chegg just doesn't solve. So there's a lot that we don't do that others may do a lot better than we do. And in some cases, that has led to an investment from us. We've invested in at least 3 companies, which is new for us. We've set aside a certain amount of money. We have about $1 billion or so on the balance sheet. So we have the ability to make investments. We just did one as an example in the United States. It's not globally, but in the United States, there's a form you can fill out to get financial aid called FAFSA. And about 70% of all students are eligible for FAFSA money and don't even know it. Unfortunately, this administration has chosen to hide the fact that in the CARES Act that there's money available for students who have emergency needs. We partnered with this company, and we made a couple of $1 million investment. We distributed it, and over 150,000 students in less than 1 week filled out the form and now get access to $5,000 that they couldn't get before. So that just shows that we can partner, shows that our brand, our reach, our data, our ability to segment, now our ability to segment globally allows us. So if somebody has something that solves a big student problem, not necessarily an institutional problem, but a student problem, because we mostly go direct. Dan R. at Chegg is the easiest way to reach me. We are making investments now we didn't do before. Heather Morris, who I know you guys know, she is now a senior advisor to Chegg because she's going to be actually moving to Europe. But she's going to stay with the company and advisor, and she's going to be working on investments and partnerships because we haven't, honestly, 4 years ago, I don't think people understand, 4 years ago, Chegg's stock price was at $3.15. We were valued at less than the cash if we sold all of our textbooks. So we think we're a reflection of the obvious trends that are happening. So for the 83% of you who voted that way, we sort of confirm that you may be right. We think the empire will fight back, but at the end of the day, if you put the student first, what do the students need? Cheaper, on-demand, online, more help, as well as that relationship with an institution, if you can, on campus and off campus. Most people, if they can go at all, won't be able to go for 4 years on a campus. Those things will evolve. So if you've got things that help students in large ways anywhere in the world, please let us know. And thank you for the question, because we have a big agenda and we're not going to be able to solve it by ourselves or get even close.
That's great. Simon, how can people get in touch?
So there are 3 specific ways, I think. The first one, so these all link to EtonX, which is our online education platform, as we discussed. The first thing is we have, as I mentioned earlier, our own, we think, very good online classroom, and it's possible for that to be whitelisted and people to essentially use the technology we've got to deliver their own products through that. The second thing is we're very serious about expanding the range of EtonX developed courses, and we're planning to invest a lot of money in that over the coming years. That is partly to generate commercial revenue, and it's partly as part of our outreach program to make opportunity available, particularly for young people in disadvantaged and vulnerable settings. And we're looking for partners to help us develop those courses. So if anyone has technology that they think could usefully partner with EtonX, we'd be very interested to hear from you. And the third thing is that the idea is that on the EtonX platform itself, over time, it will become essentially a marketplace where some of the courses will be EtonX developed and delivered courses, but also third parties will be able to use it to deliver their courses, and essentially it becomes something of a marketplace for hopefully high quality online educational provision. So those are three ways we could collaborate.
Brent, just one other area that we may be able to help people. If there's anybody who runs a school or institution in any of the countries that Chegg's at, we know on a per student basis, on a per class basis, on a per textbook basis, on a per professor basis, time of day basis, gender basis, regional basis, what students struggle with and what they don't struggle with. So we know school A versus school B. We know at school A what students struggle with in this professor's class versus this professor's class. It's not an indictment of a professor or a school. It's simply a reflection of what students come to us to ask for help on. And so we know, we've offered it for years to the publishers to improve their textbooks. They've had no interest whatsoever, because again, who's their customer? Their customer is the author and the school, not the student. And so we, you know, if you have an institution and students from Chegg go to your school and you want to know what they're struggling with, we're more than happy to provide it for free, because we actually just want to improve the quality of the educational experience. Our business model allows us to be really inexpensive, make significant investments. We don't want to be the curriculum. We want to support the curriculum. We want to be ubiquitous in what was historically called traditional education. The truth is, way more people in the United States do non-traditional education versus traditional education, which means we should switch the name. But we have that data, and that data gets incredibly more robust. We have over 40 million questions that students have asked around the world on subjects that are either in a textbook, from a class, from a country. We're now going to be doing it in letting you do it in your own language, ask in your own language, respond in your own language. It's just, it's exploding in ways that even we did not imagine or dream about. You know, we think of ourselves as brilliant by accident, which is we made choices and holy cow, but we had no idea it was going to be this big, this fast.
Amazing. Well, I think on that note, I think we're wrapping up now. Dan, Simon, this has been such a pleasure hearing from both of you. This industry, as we all know, is under huge transformation right now, undergoing huge transformation right now. And I think this is only the beginning of these conversations happening even more frequently as we watch and take part in shaping what the future needs to be. So thank you so much for providing your perspectives and allowing everyone to engage in a really thoughtful, lively, timely conversation about the future of online education.
Well, thank you for, one, brilliant moderation, because moderation is what makes the panel successful or not. And two, for Simon, this is as close as I'll ever get to Eton. Come and visit. Come and visit. Oh, I would visit in a heartbeat, but I don't want to bring down the quality of the school. It scares me, because everybody I've met from Eton has been as you've described, which is wonderful. But it's a real honor to be in any discussion with you. And I feel grateful to the Founders Forum folks for allowing me to do so. So thank you so much, and congratulations to everybody. And it's Dan R. at Chegg if there's ways that we can work together.
Thank you.
Thank you, everyone.
Very enjoyable. Thank you very much.